looking at vector direction in bearing notation. So another way that vectors can have their direction notated or written is in bearing notation. And so we look at it, everything in relationship to north. How far has the vector rotated from north in a clockwise direction? So a vector going north has a bearing of 0 degrees. A vector going east has a bearing of 90 degrees because it's rotated from the north 90 degrees. A vector with a direction heading south would have a bearing notation of 180 degrees, and finally west would have a bearing measure of 270 degrees. Now if we continue to rotate all the way up through to north again, we wouldn't write that as a bearing of 360 degrees, we would write it as 0 degrees. So your bearings measure from 0 degrees to 359 degrees in relationship to north. Let's look at some examples. So here between north and east we have this vector. It has a direction of 20 degrees north of east. What that means is from the east we're rotating 20 degrees towards the north. We recognize that there is a measure, an angle measure above here of 70 degrees. And so that's from the north moving to 70 degrees, moving in the clockwise direction. So the bearing measure is 70 degrees, and sometimes that's written as 070 degrees. So 070 degrees, or just a bearing of 70 degrees. Let's look at another example. Here between west and north we have a vector that has a direction of north 50 degrees west, and so that tells us that from the north we've rotated 50 degrees towards the west. And so if we think about what our bearing is from north, we've gone all the way through, not quite to 360, in fact we're 50 degrees shy of 360, so here we have a bearing of 310 degrees. Our next example, we have a bearing between east and south. In fact, we're 30 degrees south of east, which means we've gone past east 30 degrees. This gives us a bearing of 120 degrees. Our last example is between west and south, and our vector has a bearing, a measure of 10 degrees south of west. So we haven't made it all the way to the west. In fact, we are 10 degrees below that, which gives us a bearing measure of 260 degrees.